I'm Chinthaka Balasooriya from the School of Public Health and Community Medicine at UNSW Medicine. We look at the process of feedback as a multifaceted process. We've grouped these multiple facets into 4 principles which guide our practice. And we've found that grouping those facets into those principles allows us to start our design process and to review and critique our own design through a framework that makes sense to us. So the first principle involves that process of systematically seeking students' feedback and then using a systematic process to incorporate that feedback into our educational design. The second principle is that feedback is not only a process, but it actually requires specific skills. There is a skill in providing feedback, and there is a skill in appropriately receiving and responding to feedback. And we believe that it's a skill that needs to be developed in our students. So we have a system by which we incorporate specific activities which are aimed at developing those skills in our students. Thirdly, and this is probably the more commonly used form of feedback, thirdly, we use feedback to inform students about their performance, to critique and evaluate their performance. What is possibly unique about the approach that medicine takes is that all of our feedback is tied to a set of criteria which we have articulated as a set of graduate capabilities. Whenever we offer feedback to students, we tie that feedback to particular capability statements. So students not only understand what we are trying to say to them, but they also understand in what way that relates to their development as medical practitioners. The fourth principle, of course, is that principle of systematically seeking students' feedback on the implementation of our activities. And this happens routinely through the CAT-I process and other formal processes. But we also actively use a system of focus groups and interviews with students to gain more qualitative feedback on specific aspects of our design. Through that process, we feel that the 4 principles form a loop of feedback, which not only informs our educational design, but models that process of seeking feedback and appropriately responding to it. The principles and the loop also provide a really valuable source. It's almost a lens through which to critique and analyze our existing activities. And as we look at our existing activities through that framework, it allows us to understand where the strengths are and where the potential gaps might be. The operationalizing of that first principle is also not just a source of feedback to inform our work, but it's also a process by which we model the process of seeking and effectively responding to feedback, which we feel is a really important component of fostering that culture of feedback within our student community. So it's not a case of us saying that feedback is important, but demonstrating through our own practice that feedback is actually a beneficial process that enhances our own performance. This, we found, has helped in engaging our students a lot more in the process of feedback. And then as we move into that next step of actively fostering those skills in students, there is a bit more meaning for them because they understand why they need to develop these skills and how it's going to be important to them in their future practice. And what I would advise if anyone was thinking of using these principles is you can use it in a number of ways. And clearly, you would start with what you've got. And I understand that people could be anywhere along a spectrum of very well-developed educational programs to starting out. So if you're starting out, this would provide you a really good framework through which to consider whether you want to include feedback within your activity design, which elements need to be focused on. And if you do decide to focus on 2, 3, or maybe all 4 of them, we can provide you with some examples to guide you in designing activities which would suit your own discipline. If you're further down the track and you already have something that's already fairly well developed, Then the loop and the principles provide that framework through which to critique your own design, to do a self-critique or a peer critique of your existing design, to see in which areas are the strengths and in which areas might there be some gaps, and is there potential to address those gaps.